Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something really important, and we're going to demystify our modern spending reality with absolutely zero shame. So, you've probably seen this viral statistic dominating the headlines lately, the one claiming the average American now spends 179% of what they earn. Crazy, right? But is that actually true? And honestly, more importantly, is it happening to you? Let's find out. But before we get bogged down in the numbers, I want to ask you a super real question. You know that split-second pause before you open your banking app? Just that half second where your thumb kind of hovers and you quietly brace yourself for whatever number is about to pop up? Well, if you felt that hesitation even once this week, hear me loud and clear. You are not broken. Seriously, and you are definitely not alone. Millions of us are feeling this exact same dread. So today, we're going to expose the invisible machine that's actually creating it. All right, let's start with that number you've almost certainly seen floating around your social media feeds, 179%. It almost always comes with this shocked caption about the average American spending almost twice their income. But you know what almost nobody mentions when they hit repost? It was never actually describing the comfortable middle-class earner. Nope. It describes the bottom rung, the lowest earning 20% of households in the entire country. And sad to say, that 179% figure, it's actually an older, kind of softer number. Okay, let's dive into this and look at the newest government figures because they reveal a much harsher reality. The lowest earning fifth recently spent just over $35,000 in a single year. But guess what they brought in? Under $17,000 before taxes. You run that math and you sail right past 200%. We're talking about roughly 27 million real families, people with real rent due on the first of the month, literally spending more than $2 for every single dollar that walks in the door. And here's the kicker. This quiet engine of American debt doesn't just stay at the bottom of the income ladder. What we're looking at is an invisible split in our world, something economists call a K-shaped economy. Basically, we have two different economies living side by side. If you're on the upward curve, meaning you already own a house or maybe hold some investments, rising asset prices totally cushion every blow for you. But if you're on the downward curve, relying solely on your wages, man, costs are sprinting ahead while your pay is just crawling. So if you feel like you're running twice as hard just to stay in place, please know it's not a character flaw. It is an incredibly accurate read of a system that is literally tilting right under your feet. Section 1. The 3 gears of the machine. How the system silently traps everyday earners. Let's break down this invisible machine gear by gear, because I can promise you this whole setup wasn't just built by some mustache-twirling villain overnight. The first gear is absolutely the one you feel every single day at the register. Inflation. Even as it's cooled off a little bit heading into 2026, it's still creeping around 3%. And for lower and middle earners, well, wages have just been flat out losing, not foot race. When rent, groceries, and insurance are all rising way faster than your income, something has to absorb that difference, right? Which brings us right to the second gear. And look, we're not talking about fancy lattes and impulse buys here. For a typical household, close to a third of everything spent just goes straight to housing. Another sixth, that goes to transportation. You stack food on top of that, and an enormous chunk of the budget is completely swallowed before anyone even mentions wants versus needs. This is what we call the concrete floor of modern life, and it just keeps rising, landing especially hard on younger renters who have to watch down payments drift further and further out of reach. Now, when necessities cost more than your paycheck, the third gear quietly steps forward. The credit card. Get this. Total household debt just crossed a staggering $18.8 trillion. Trillion. And credit card balances, they've grown by 60% since the pandemic, hitting $1.3 trillion. But the part that really makes the accountants wince is that 21% average interest rate. People are literally paying a fortune just for the privilege of carrying the money they had to borrow just to survive. It's a really slow, painful squeeze. Section 2. 4 faces of invisible debt. The perfectly sensible decisions that widen the gap. Because listen, nobody wakes up in the morning and chooses to spend 200% of their income. It happens through small, entirely reasonable steps. Let's look at 4 composite examples built from some very real, very common situations. First up, we have Tessa. Now, Tessa earned a really solid, well-deserved raise at work. Awesome, right? But quietly, right alongside that raise came the upgrades. A slightly nicer apartment, maybe a newer, more reliable car, some fresh streaming subscriptions. No single choice she made was wild, but her spending simply rose to meet the raise and then leaned just a tiny bit past it. We call this lifestyle creep. Tessa isn't irresponsible. She's just operating inside a system that is engineered to absorb every extra dollar the literal second it appears. Next up is Renata, who fell into the sneaky trap of frictionless spending. She used buy now, pay later apps to split some purchases into 4 easy installments. A little bit for some clothes, a little bit for a cool new gadget. But stacked together, she suddenly had 5 separate automatic withdrawals hitting her checking account every month, and she completely lost track of the total amount she owed. When financial tools are perfectly engineered to feel basically weightless, our brains just stop keeping score, and that spending gap widens in total silence. Okay, and before you think this only happens to lower earners, let's meet Alonzo. Alonzo clears well over $100,000 a year, yet he feels totally broke by the 20th of the month. How? Why? Well, because a bigger paycheck simply bought him a bigger set of obligations. A large mortgage, 2 financed cars, private lessons for the kids, those vacations that kind of feel mandatory. His fixed costs absolutely swallowed his entire high income. Earning more money didn't outrun the problem for him. It really just raised the ceiling on his spending, leaving him reaching for that credit card the second an unexpected expense popped up. And this brilliantly illustrates our 4th face, Dominic. Let's say Dominic put $6,000 on a credit card during a really rough patch. If he decides to pay a comfortable $150 a month, it's going to take him 6 years and cost $4,400 in interest alone. Okay, what if he only pays the bare minimum? Get this, almost 18 years to pay it off and $9,000 in pure interest. But flip the script. If he nudges that payment up just a bit to $200, he clears the whole thing in under 4 years, slashing that interest down to $2,600. It's the exact same debt, the exact same 21% rate, but a completely different outcome just based on how aggressively he attacks it. Section 3. Your 5-step escape plan, moving from the fog into the daylight. Now we're getting to the good part. This is where you put your own hands back on the steering wheel and take control. Let's walk through an unglamorous but highly effective 5-step escape plan. All right, here is your roadmap. And the best part, step 1, costs absolutely nothing except a little bit of honesty. Step 1, find your real number. For just one ordinary month, I want you to become a quiet witness to your money. Track every single dollar going out with zero judgment. None. You are simply hunting for the distance between the number you assume you spend and the number you truly spend, because the reality is you cannot close a gap that you refuse to look at. Step 2 is all about separating the floor from the fog. Remember, your floor is the true concrete necessities, housing, food, transportation. But the fog? That's the forgotten streaming subscriptions, the unused gym memberships, those little frictionless installments we talked about. I want you to walk straight through that fog and ask yourself one calm question. If this vanished tomorrow, would I pull out my wallet and pay real money to bring it back? If the answer is no, cut it right then and there. These aren't huge sacrifices. They are just leaks that you simply stopped noticing. Let's move to step 3 and see how this builds your defense. Before you go charging at your debt, you absolutely need a starter emergency fund, just a modest cushion of about $1,000. Skipping this buffer is the exact reason why people fall right back into the credit card trap the second a tire goes flat. And here is a serious pro tip for you. Prepay your predictable surprises. Think about it. Somehow Christmas manages to happen in December every single year, right? And car tires? They always seem to find the absolute only nail on the entire road. So set aside a tiny amount monthly for them now, and they will completely stop becoming a fresh new balance hitting you at 21% later. Once you have that $1,000 buffer, you're going to hurl every single freed up dollar at your most expensive 21% debt until it is completely dead. And then we hit step 4, automate the gap. Do not, under any circumstances, leave your saved money just sitting there in your checking account. Move it automatically the literal day after payday. You must pay yourself first, because human willpower, it gets tired, but an automatic system, it never does. Finally, step 5. If you can find a way to generate new income, send that new money straight into the plan before your lifestyle can rise up and greet it. Section 4, the power of compounding time, the mathematical payoff of closing your gap. Let's see how all this creates massive momentum in real life. Going back to Tessa as our example. Imagine Tessa tracks her spending, trims $300 a month out of her fog, builds her buffer, clears her debt, and then points that newly freed up $300 toward her future using an automatic transfer. So the absolutely crucial point here is what happens next. If Tessa lets that $300 a month grow at a steady, historically reasonable rate of, say, 7% a year, in 30 years, it becomes around $366,000, just by recovering $300 of her own money from the fog. But here is the truly incredible part. Of that $366,000 total, only about $108,000 is money she personally set aside. Over $250,000 is pure magical growth. That is literally your money working quietly for you while you sleep. I mean, even if you only start with $50 a month, if you leave it alone for 40 years, it grows to well over $100,000. But listen, time is the real multiplier here. If you delay starting that $300 a month by just 5 years, it only reaches about $243,000. That little 5-year wait, it costs you more than $120,000 in growth. That is the strange, beautiful cruelty of compounding. The single most valuable asset you own isn't some massive salary. It's time, and it is leaking away with every single delay. You've got to start today. Here's the bottom line. Spending more than you earn is rarely a moral failing. Honestly, it's a visibility failure. You've been living in a system practically engineered to make spending completely frictionless and saving almost invisible. But once you seal up those leaks, bury that expensive debt, and get your automatic transfer humming in the daylight, you face a brand new, really exciting question. Where should this money actually go? Just parking it untouched lets inflation quietly eat away its value over time. You're going to need a steady, predictable foundation for your investments, something like bonds maybe, to give your future a really stable place to begin. But hey, that is a journey for another day. For now, focus on closing your gap and step out into the daylight. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.